I have selected some of the verses which appeal to me very much. And based on the contents of the shlokas are also very much interesting. So on the basis of that particular aspect, I have chosen some of the shlokas and share with you, without going deep into the philosophical aspects, but passing references on the concepts of Advaita will be there in every now and then. And I'm remembered of the Vidyaranya Day lecture given by Professor K. Ramamurthy Shastrigal long ago in 1962 under the auspices of Sanskrit Academy itself, here in the same campus itself. And I have collected some of the references, some of the verses which he has composed on Vidyaranya, which I will recite them at the end of the lecture. And as a Mangala Shloka which he has mentioned, Vidya Vidyotita Shantam Vidyaranya Gurum Bhaje Yat Kritihi Avalambhyanye Virajante Vipashitaha. First, in the beginning itself, there is a confusion with regard to the authorship of the text. So there are three names which occur frequently: Bharati Tirtha, Vidyaranya, and the other Vidya Tirtha and Bharati Tirtha. The names are being confused. So one after the other. One is said to be the Peethadipati of Sringeri Matha, and the other is said to be the author. And there is another name also, Madhava Mantrin. People say that it is Madhava who after taking up the sannyasa became the Vidyaranya. So this view is also there. So we will see all those things in the course of the lecture. Vidyaranya flourished in the 14th century AD, and he was a family preceptor of the kings of Vijayanagara kingdom. He is classed with the greatest of the post-Shankara Advaitins. Scholars are divided in their views with regard to the identity between Vidyaranya and Madhava. Madhava, the reputed author of Kala Madhaviya, Vyavahara Madhava, etc., was the brother of Sayana, who wrote commentaries on Vedas. And according to tradition, actually, Madhava in his later years became an ascetic and was named as Vidyaranya. And of course, P.B. Kane also mentions this in the history of Dharma Shastra, also confirms the Madhava Vidyaranya identity by stating that the Dharma Shastra work Veeramitrodaya ascribes a commentary on the Parashara Dharma Samhita composed by Madhava to Vidyaranya himself. And Rao Bahadur R. Narasimhachari also has established the identity of Madhava and Vidyaranya in his article published in Indian Antiquary. And there will be scattered thoughts on the Panchadashi, and it will not be in sequence. Kindly excuse me for that, because I remember one popular statement in the funfair of the Reader's Digest. It says, speeches are made easy. Speeches are easy to conceive, hard to deliver. So, in that sense, I have collected some of the references, and there may be scattered. Of course, Panchadashi, the Vidyaranya himself repeats many times. And the repetition of the contents, he says, is only to stress the Advaitic tenets. So, the repetition in that sense does not become a defect at all. So, and Vidyaranya was closely associated with Vidyarthita and Bharati Tirtha. The text in an inscription of the Sringeri plates of Harihara, the son of Bukka eulogizes the sages Vidyarthita, Bharati Tirtha and Vidyaranya thus: Vidyatirthat Janimati Shubhe Bharati Tirtha Padme Nitya Vyaktadvaya Chid Amrutananda Saurabhya Bhaji Vidyaranya Dumani Mahima Prapta Lakshmi Vilase Bhuyo Bhuyo Viharati Sukhi Bukka Bhupala Hamsaha. That is, the swan Bukka sports happily near the lotus Bharati Tirtha, which, having sprung from Vidyatirtha, possesses the fragrance of joy from a knowledge of non-dualism and expands by the rays of the sun of Vidyaranya. There appears to be a confusion between the Vidyaranya and Bharati Tirtha again. DIKSHITAR attributes several chapters of Panchadashi to Bharati Tirtha, while he makes the mention of Vidyaranya. Ramakrishna Pandita, of course, when we go through the Panchadashi entry under in New Catalogus Catalogarum, there are so many commentaries mentioned under the Panchadashi. The thing is, the name Ramakrishna Pandita or Ramakrishna occurs frequently in many of the manuscripts. It seems, unless a person goes into the text, he will not be able to ascertain whether the commentator was Ramakrishna or somebody else. But the name Ramakrishna Pandita is found in many of the manuscripts. So many of the entries contain. It contains This Panchadashi contains almost 15 commentaries, including anonymous commentaries also. This was published long ago. There's many editions are there. It was translated into Gujarati and many other languages also because of the interesting matter it contains. Ramakrishna Pandita, the commentator on Panchadashi, mentions at the beginning of this commentary on the chapter Tripti Deepa, the name Bharati Tirtha as author. And Ramakrishna Pandita, however, mentions Vidyaranya along with Bharati Tirtha, paying obeisance to them. The interesting aspect, another thing is, in the beginning of the text itself, he mentions Bharati Tirtha Vidyaranya together. So there seems to be the two names. So he has not separated Vidyaranya from Bharati Tirtha. He mentions Bharati Tirtha as a separate individual and Vidyatirtha as a separate individual. That is why he has used the dual name as Natva Bharati Tirtha Vidyaranya Maheshwaro, like that he says. And without going further deep into the study, of course, there are passing references will be given. Madhava Bharati Tirtha Vidyaranya, we have a glimpse of the contents of the Panchadashi authored by Vidyaranya. G. Mishra, he has in his doctoral thesis, which was published later as Anubhuti Prakasha of Vidyaranya, mentions a list of more than the works in various branches like Purva Mimamsa, where he has written the Jaimini and Nyayamala, and in the case of Smriti, Parashara Madhaviya, in the astronomy, astrology, etc. In 6 works in Advaita Vedanta are also ascribed to Vidyaranya. And besides all these things, he has also written commentaries on Upanishads. Vidyaranya is said to have written commentaries on Upanishads. Brahmashri K. Ramurti Shastrikal, with whose verse I started, professor of Purva Mimamsa in the Sanskrit college long ago, and he mentions Madhava as the elder brother of Sayana and Bhoganatha, and he belonged to the Bharadvaja Gotra, became Vidyaranya after being initiated into asceticism. This Madhava was different from Madhava Mantrin. Another identity was there, and he was a minister. He was known by the name Madhava Mantrin, who belonged to the Angirasa Gotra. So this Gotra is also different, and was his disciple of his Shivacharya by name Kashi Vilasa. And this is evident from the inscription where the verse runs, Gotreyo Angirasam Prachanda Tapasaha Chaunda Prithvisura Prashtad Utbhava Metya Niti Sarasau Datvadhiyam Dhaishanim Surisannapi Sarvada Navamanaha Plakladayat Plaklad Nanochitam Yat Bhuyak Kavidam Venakti Tanute No Kasya Tenad Bhutam. This Madhava Mantrin wrote the commentary Tatparya Deepika and Sutta Samhita, and this is again known from his own statement. He says, he being the student of that Kashi Vilasa, he says in the beginning of the commentary, Srimad Kashi Vilasakya Kriya Shaktis Sevina, Srimad Trembaka Padabhya Seva Anishnat Chetasa, Veda Shastra Pratishthai, Srimad Madhava Mantrina, Tatparya Deepika Sutta Samhita Yaha Vidhiyate. And it's quite common to name the commentary as Tatparya Deepika in most of the scriptures. This Tatparya Deepika, here also in the Panchadashi also, the commentator has named the commentary as Tatparya Deepika or Tatparya Chandrika, based on the contents. Professor T.M.B. Mahadevan, however, uses the name Bharati Tirtha. In almost all the publications of T.M.B. Mahadevan, whenever he refers to Vidyaranya, he adds the name Bharati Tirtha along with Vidyaranya. So he mentions as Bharati Tirtha Vidyaranya on the basis of the manuscripts on Vivarana Prameya Sangraha, deposited at Tanjore, Saraswati Library. And that manuscript runs, Iti Srimad Paramamsa Parivrajaka Srimad Bharati Tirtha Vidyaranya Munivarya. So the names are together mentioned as Bharati Tirtha Vidyaranya Munivarya Virachita Vivarana Prameya Sangrahe Chaturtha Sutre Dvitiya Varanagam Samattam. In a manuscript copied by Brahmashri Polakam Ramashastri, from a printed edition on the Drishya Viveka containing 40 verses. Usually the Drishya Viveka published by Ramakrishna contains 46 verses, while this particular manuscript mentions only 40 verses, wherein the colophon runs as Iti Srimad Paramamsa Parivrajaka Acharya Varya Sri Bharati Tirtha Vidyaranya Virachita. So the Bharati Tirtha Vidyaranya Virachita Drishya Virachitaha Drishya Vivekaha Samaptaha, like that. So again, in a manuscript of the work Purushartha Prabodha by Brahmananda Bharati, there occurs the following line, Iti Sri Vidyaranya Sanyaihi. It's quite clear. Vidyaranya Sanyaihi Sri Bharati Tirtha Deshikaihi, which means Sri Bharati Tirtha and Vidyaranya are one and the same person. Based on these, T.M.P. Mahadevan, however, is of the view that Vidyaranya formed part of Bharati Tirtha's sannyasa name, but only that it was an appellation meaning forest of learning. Then further again we'll go into the text. So without going further into the identity of the authorship Panchadashi, it will be interesting to go through the contents of the text. Dasgupta in his History of Philosophy ever mentions 4 commentaries: Tattva Bodhini, Vritti Prabhakara by Nischala Swamin, Tatparya Bodhini by Ramakrishna. See, again the name is changed here as Tatparya Bodhini. Usually in the colophon it mentions as Tatparya Deepika, whereas it is mentioned as Tatparya Bodhini by Dr. Dasgupta. And Tatparya Bodhini by Ramakrishna, and another commentary by Sadananda, which is not available. They are all mentioned in the New Catalogus Catalogorum. The confusion over the identity is again seen in these works. It is traditionally believed that the Panchadashi was jointly written by Vidyaranya and Bharati Tirtha. It's quite evident from the commentary also. Ramakrishna, as I already said, Ramakrishna, for example, in the beginning of the commentary, in the opening of this commentary, salutes both Natva Sri Bharati Tirtha Vidyaranya Munishwarau in the dual form. And this is seen throughout the text. But the commentator Nischala Dasa Swamin points out in his Vritti Prabhakara commentary, this is also a commentary on Panchadashi, Vritti Prabhakara, that Vidyaranya was the author of the first 10 chapters and Bharati Tirtha of the remaining 5. In the opening of the 6th chapter again, namely Chitradeepa Prakaranam, Ramakrishna writes, Chikirchitasya Granthasya Nishpratyuha Paripurnaya Paramatmani iti padena Ishtadevata Tatvanusandhana Lakshanam Mangalam Acharan. It's quite clear, saying that Praripsitasya Granthasya Nirvigna Parisamaptartam Mangalam Acharan, which clearly indicates the beginning of the particular portion. But there the author seems to be different from the one that is already described earlier. Actually, the contents of the Panchadashi goes like this. Panchadashi is said, as the very name indicates, it contains 15 chapters. These 15 chapters are divided into 3 sections. Each section contains 5 chapters. And the first 5 chapters are named as Viveka Panchaka. And second 5 chapters are named as Deepa Panchaka. And third 5 chapters are named as Ananda Panchaka. So in these 15 chapters, he has highlighted the tenets of Advaita in a beautiful style, in a lucid style, that and a layman also can easily understand the ideas of the Advaita. So in such a way, he has used simple sentences which are seen in the day-to-day affairs activities also. And similarly, in the opening of the 4th chapter of namely the Dvaita Viveka Prakarana, the commentator again writes, Chikirchitasya Granthasya Nishpratyuha Paripurnaya Abhilashita Devata Tatvanusandhana Lakshanam Mangalam Acharan. It's quite confusing, saying that the first 5 sets seems to be a section, whole collection of a text. And there, only the 4th chapter has been mentioned as the Chikirchitasya Granthasya Mangalam Acharan, like that. So it has to be, only when we get other commentaries, we'll be able to see what is exactly who is exactly the author of the text. The text Panchadashi, as the term indicates, contains 15 chapters, which I said, and they are grouped under 3 sections with 5 sub-chapters in each. The first section, titled Viveka Panchaka, deals with the investigation into the nature of Brahman, of Jiva, and of the world, and the oneness of the Jiva with Brahman. This is something like a discrimination, which is one of the first step in the sadhana chatushtaya, like Nitya Nitya Vastu Viveka. So casting away all those non-eternal things aside and confirming the eternal things as a basic one. Jiva and of the world, and the oneness of the Jiva with Brahman. The second section, titled Deepa Panchaka, describes the enlightenment derived from a course of inquiry, and the third section, titled Ananda Panchaka, deals with the bliss obtained from enlightenment. Philosophical literature generally can be divided into 2 groups, 2 categories. One is the independent texts, independent short treatises that dwell at length on the basic tenets of separate respective schools of philosophy, and the other in the form of refutation of views pertaining to the tenets of respective schools of philosophy. Through this Khandana and Mandana, of course, the philosophical literature also grew fast. So the Panchadashi belongs to the independent category. It doesn't, though it has got references to the other schools in lighter criticism, not directly, vehemently, unlike Jayanta Bhatta, criticizing vehemently the rival schools. This is gentle criticism of other schools, that too passing references whenever their views differ from the Advaita. So passing criticisms are made, not exactly, not vehemently like the Jayanta Bhatta. As Vidyaranya says, even at the outset, after saluting his preceptor, the aim of the work is only to teach the supreme truth in an easily understandable manner to those whose hearts have been purified through the worship of the lotus feet of the Guru. He has worshipped his own Guru, and his Guru was Shankarananda. So after saluting this Shankarananda, yes, there is a dispute with regard to the authorship of the Vidyaranya. If you say like that, wave the hand, but we'll have it at the end. So, tat padambhurgadvandva seva nirmala chedasam sukhabodaya tattvasya vivekoyam vidhiyate. Vidyaranya, while explaining the tenets of Advaita, points out the views of other schools like Bauddhas, the Madhyamika Bauddhas, Tarkikas, in fact Prabhakaras and other schools also, and refutes them. The reasoning based on the principle of Anvaya Vyatireka, on the principle of Anvaya Vyatireka. And this appears to be the discrimination that is the first step in the four essential means, sadhana chatushtaya, as Vidyaranya says, Anvaya Vyatireka-bhyam panchakosha vivekataha svatmanam tata udhritya param brahma pravadyate. The basic skill or qualification essential for an adherent or seeker after truth is the ability to discriminate the real from the unreal. Vidyaranya indicates various ways through which this ability to distinguish could be gained. One of the most suitable methods in the analysis of the three states of experience, waking, dream and deep sleep or deep sleep, the Jagrat, Swapna, Sushupti. As a result of such analysis, one realizes that the self persists in all the states while the objects vary and they are transitory. Shabda sparshadayo vedyaha vaichitya jagare prathak tato vibhakta tatsamvid aikarupyan nabhidyate tata swapnetra vedyantu nasthiram jagare sthiram tad deraha ataha tayoho samvid ekarupa nabhidyate. The underlying consciousness that doesn't undergo any modification in all the three states is emphasized here. The objects of knowledge, namely sound, touch, etc., which are perceived in the waking state are different from each other because of their peculiarities. But the consciousness of these, which is different from them, it does not differ because of its homogeneity. Similar in the case of the dream state. Here, the perceived objects are transitory, and in the waking state, they seem to be permanent. So there is difference between them. But the perceiving consciousness in both the states does not differ. It is homogeneous. The same conclusion may be reached by investigation into the 5 sheaths also, Panchakosha. So the first one is Tattva Viveka Prakarana, the second one is Panchakosha Viveka, the third one is Panchabhuta Viveka, and the fourth one is Dvaita Viveka, and the fifth one is Mahavakya Viveka. So there are about more than 1,500 verses are there. So divided into 15 adhyayas. So this Mahavakya Prakarana seems to be the shortest one, having 8 verses. Otherwise, most of them have 3-digit numbers. Many of the chapters contain more than 100 verses. That seemingly cover the Panchakoshas that seemingly cover the self. In the first chapter named Tattva Viveka Prakarana, Vidyaranya highlights the nature of consciousness of the Sat aspect of consciousness through the mention of 3 states. Through the mention of 3 states, and here Maya and Avidya, the 2 aspects of Prakriti, that is the primordial substance, Panchikarana, etc., are also mentioned there. Though there is a special chapter on Panchakosha Viveka, Vidyaranya indicates it here in the first chapter itself when he says that the seeker disciple, having received the Upadesha from the teacher who has realized Brahman and differentiating the self from these 5 sheaths, attains supreme bliss of release. Upadesham avapyaivam acharya tatvadarshinaha panchakosha vivekena labante nivriting param, and enumerates the Panchakoshas. Another interesting factor in the Panchadashi is But most of the chapters contain Palashruti also. So in the, especially in the Deepa Panchaka, he says, he specifically mentions the Palashruti. So anybody who contemplates on the contents of this particular chapter will easily move forward in the spirituality and easily attain the realization. So that seems to be the Palashruti of each and every chapter in the Deepa Panchaka section. In other sections also the Palashruti is slightly modified. He mentions that and enumerates the Panchakoshas as Annam Prano Mano Buddhi Anandescheti Panchate. Then he defines the Shravana Manana Nidhyasana and adds Samadhi state, where he says Dhyatra Dhyane Parityajya Kramat Adhyaya Gocharam Nivata Deepavachittam Samadhi Abhidiyate. Though this seems to be the contents of the Yogananda Prakarana which occurs in the Ananda Panchaka, but some of the times, as I already mentioned, many of them are repeated in the first chapter as well as in the second chapter and the third chapter also. The repetitions are there, but in order to drive the idea powerfully. Here, Dhyatra Dhyane Parityajya Kramat Adhyaya Gocharam Nivata Deepavachittam Samadhi Abhidiyate. Defines Samadhi. When the mind gradually leaves of the ideas of the meditator and the act of meditation and is merged in the sole object of meditation, namely the self, and is already like the flame of lamp in a breezeless place, it is called superconscious state. That is a Samadhi state. Vidyaranya, while concluding this chapter on the Tattvaveka Prakarana, highlights the benefits again that accrue from the knowledge, the philosophical tenets discussed in that chapter. As for instance, at the close of this chapter on Tattvaveka, he says, Ittam Tattvavivekam Vidhaya Vidhivan Manas Samadhaya Vigalita Samskriti Bandaha Prapnodi Paramparam Naraha Na Chirat. So quickly, as early as possible, you will get that state. In the second chapter, namely the Panchabhuta Viveka, Vidyaranya dwells at length on the characteristics of the five principal elements. His style of explaining them with the onomatopoeic words will certainly enable the readers or the seekers after the truth to understand them easily. Onomatopoeic words. For example, he says, while explaining the tanmatras of the Panchabhutas, he says, Shabdasparshau Ruparasau Gandho Bhutagana Ime Eka Dvi Tri Chatuf Panchaguna Vyomadishu Kramat. He mentions the tanmatras in sequence of all this. Prithvi up tejas like Akasha like that. Pradidhvanir Vyachabdaha Vayu Bisiti Shabdanam. The Bisiti Shabdanam, the sound that makes the breathing sound. And Anushnasita Samsparshau Vanno Bhugu Dvanihi. He uses the term Bhugu Dvani. We used to say Gubu Gubu and Bhugu like that. So he specifically mentions the term Bhugu Dvanihi, Vanno. Akashe Tavad Shabdaye Gunaha. And the commentator adds this in his commentary. He says, Akashe Tavad Shabdaye Gunaha Sacha Pratidhvani Rupaha Vayu Shabdasparsho Tatra Vayu Shabdam Anukarena Darshayati. The commentator says, imitating the sound, Vayu Shabdam Anukarena Darshayati Bisiti Shabdam Shabdanamiti. Evam Uttare Anukarana Shabdanam Drashtavyam Tasya Sparshamaha Anushnashita Samsparshiri Vannau Shabdasparsha Rupani Trayo Gunaha Vannau Bhugu Dvanihi. Thus the characteristics of three, that is namely the Akasha, Vayu and Agni, are the five principal elements are described. The remaining two are also mentioned later in successive form. The remaining two in sequence are water and earth, which are, according to Upanishad, Trivitkarana contains only these three, no? So, Trivitkarana. That's it. So, Ushnasparsha, then he adds other characteristics. Ushnasparsha Prabharupam Jale Bulubulu Dvanihi. See, the sound is the Bulubulu Dvanihi. Sheetasparsha Shuklarupam Rasaha Madhuryamiritam. A fire feels hot and its color is red. Water makes a unique rippling sound. It is cold to the touch and white, besides sweet in taste. And finally the earth, which has all the above five characteristics, namely sound, the characteristics peculiar to Akasha, touch and sound that of Vayu, form, touch and sound that of Agni, sound, touch, form and taste that of Up, and added to it smell, the unique characteristics of earth, besides the four mentioned above. Bhumau kadakada shabdaha. The sound again is Bhumau kadakada shabdaha. Katinyam sparshayishyate. Neeladikam chitrarupam. Madhuramladiko rasaha. Thus, in all the above 5 verses, describing the characteristics of the 5 principal elements, we find the BC, the Shabdanam, Bhugu Bhugu Dvanihi, and Bulu Bulu Dvanihi, Kadakada Shabdaha, which are undoubtedly Anukarana Shabdas. Sometimes these terms are still in, we can see these terms are still in vogue, which are being used in common parlance also. The 5 faculties are also enumerated later with their individual characteristics. The 5 senses of perception or knowledge, jnanendriyas, the faculties of action, namely the karmendriyas. The mind is said to be the lord of the 10 indriyas and is seated in the place of heart, which is like a lotus bud. It is the inner instrument which depends on the organs of sense and action for its relation or association with the external objects. Usually, the Vidyaranya has taken many of the Upanishadic statements as the plot of his, as the main theme of his chapters. So, taking each and every Upanishadic statement, he forms the contents of that chapter, respective chapter. Many of the Upanishadic statements have been used and he elaborates on them. And in the case of mind, he says, Mano Dashendriya Adhyaksham Hrit Padma Golake Sthitam Tacha Antakaranam Bhakyeshu Asvatantriyad Vina Indriyehi. Mentioning the 3 gunas, Vidyaranya indicates the 3 gunas as their products. Vairagyam, Kshantihi, Audaryam Ityadyaha Sattasambhavaha. Kamakrodhav, Lobhayatnav Ityadyaha Rajasothitaha. Alasyam, Bhranti Tantradyaha Vikaraha Tamasothitaha. And adds the merits of these 3 gunas, which seems to be the unique one. Satvikaihi punya nishpattihi, papotpattischa rajasaihi, tamasaihi nobhayam kintu vrithayuhu kshapanam bhaved. With the tamasa, it's only vritha ayuh kshapanam. Discussing the creation on the basis of the Vedic hymn Nasadasit, which is there in the Rigveda, Vidyaranya cites Gaudapadacharya and Shankaracharya and refutes the views of Shunyavadins, the Madhyamikas. He says, Bhagavat Pujyapadascha Shushka Tarka Pato Namon Ahur Madhyamikan Bhrantan Achintye Asmin Sadatmani Anadritya Shrutim Maurkhyad Ime Bauddhaha Tamasvinaha Apedire Niratmatvam Anumanaika Chakshushaha. So the example ordinarily given for a self-contradictory statement is my mother is sterile, mama mata vandhya, like that. These are the popular statement which contradictory with its own explanation. If she is a mother, she could not have been sterile, and if she was sterile, she could not be a mother. Similarly, void, which is a mere negative of everything, cannot be attributed any existence as if it were a positive thing. Vidyaranya has taken up the Upanishadic passages, as I said, and dealt with them elaborately in all the chapters of the text. He stands on the well-known passage on in the Chandogya Upanishad, where sage Uddalaka teaches his son Shvetaketu that this manifold universe is of infinite names and forms, was before creation the ever-existing self itself, the one and only one without a second. If the full purport of the passage is fully understood, one can arrive at a proper conception of the absolute reality underlying the universe. To explain this, Sri Vidyaranya uses many common occurrences as examples to highlight the idea. While criticizing those who postulate name and form to the absolute, Sri Vidyaranya equates to a person with his senses immersed in an ocean becomes incapable. The intellect of this person who postulates name and form, on hearing about the entity which is partless and homogeneous, is unable to grasp it and is afraid of it. This is a beautiful shloka which from the text itself you can easily understand the meaning of it. Magnasyabdhau yatha akshyani vikpalani tatha asya dhihi akhandaika rasam shutva nishprachara vibhetyataha. So this doesn't require any explanation actually. In the succeeding chapter again, dealing with the 5 sheets, the Panchakoshas, which hide the self, it is said, which is not related to them. The hiding koshas, they are not related to the Atma at all. Here again, Vidyaranya takes up the Taittiriya Upanishad statement, which states, Yo Veda Nihitam Guhayam Paramevyon. So, taking these particular Upanishadic passages, he goes on to explain the contents in an elaborate manner. He knows what is situated, he who knows what is situated in the supreme space, in the cave. In the Sri Vidyaranya says, Dehad Abhyantarah Pranaha, Pranad Abhyantaram Manaha, Tadakarta, Tato Bhokta, Guha Seyam Parampara. So this Guha is in sequence. So it's not 1 or 2 limited. Here, the terms prana in the sloka which has been mentioned as Dehad Abhyantara Pranaha, there, the mere term refers to Pranamaya Kosha. Pranaha, Pranamayaha, Abhyantaraha. Antaraha, Pranat, Pranamayat, Manaha, Manomaya Kosha. And Abhyantaraha, and inside it again, Abhyantara Antaraha Tato, Manomayat, Karta, Vijnanamayaha. And Tataha Antaraha, and again further deep into it, iti Anushajati. Thus it goes deeper into that koshas. Tato Vijnanamayat Bhokta Anandamayaha. Iti Purvavat Antaraitya. It goes deep one into the other. Seyam Annamayat Anandamayantanam Parampara Guha Shabdena Uchyate. So this is indicated by the term Guha. So that one which is existing inside the one and in sequence. So that particular place is mentioned as Guha here. Thus, these 5 sheets are situated one within the other in sequence. The Annamaya Kosha is born of the food assimilated by the parents and is sustained by the food alone. Pitrubhukta Annajat Viryat Jataha Annenaiva Vardhate. Dehaha Saha Annamayaha Na Atma Pragcha Urdham Tadabhavataha. This physical sheath is not the self or Atman, for it comes into being at one moment and goes out of existence at another. That which is born is bound to perish, and that which perishes cannot be the real one. Similarly, in the case of other koshas. Hence, after negating these for their impermanence, that witness consciousness which remains is the true nature of oneself. This is also said to be the Kutasa Chaitanya, and this is the one which doesn't undergo any modification. Panchakosha Parityage Sakshi Bodha Avaseshataha Swaswarupam eva syat Shunyatvam Tasya Durghatam. And he adds, Astitavat Swayam Nama Vivada Vishayatpataha Tasminnapi Vivadasched Prativadyatra Ko Bhaved. Who will be the person to question us? Astitavat Swayam Nama Vivada Avishayatpataha Tasminnapi Vivadasched Prativadi Atra Ko Bhaved. So this is quite clear from the mere statement itself. It becomes clear without any, it doesn't need any explanation at all. That there is certainly what is called self. What is called self is not a matter of dispute. If there is dispute about the existence of self, who will be the disputant here? See, Vidyaranya explains the nature of the self, Ishvara and Jiva, as Satyam Jnanam Anantam Yad Brahma, Tad Vastu Tasya Tat, Ishvaratvam Cha Jivatvam, Upadhi Dvaya Kalpitam. It's only because of the Upadhi that these two are made, Ishvaratva and Jivatva. Brahman, which is true, conscious and limitless, infinite, is the real thing. The state of being Ishvara and the state of being Jiva are imposed upon it by 2 attributes. There is an indescribable power of Aishvara, that is Aishwari Shakti, which rules out all things and is hidden in all things from the Anandamaya Kosha. That is, it goes back from the reverse, from the Anandamaya Kosha down to the Annamaya Kosha. The necessity for granting such a power is necessary to maintain the order and prevent confusion among the things of the universe. It is Brahman itself, by association with the attributes of that power, gets the nature of Ishvara. Brahman itself, when the koshas are considered as attributes, gets the nature Jiva. Tat Chaktyupayo Upadi Samyogad Brahma Eva Ishvaratam Vrajet. Koshopadhi vivakshayam yadi brahmaiva jivatam. So he explains, as the same person is a father and also a grandfather relatively to his son and grandson, it is possible in the case of Brahman also to be Ishvara and Jiva. If this is realized, or if a person knows Brahman thus, he verily becomes Brahman. And since there is no birth for Brahman, the knower also will not be born again. That's a beautiful verse which says, because he has realized the Brahman and he becomes a Brahman, because there is no birth for the Brahman, and the knower of Brahman also will not have any birth at all. So it clearly indicates that. So in the remaining two chapters, in the first section are termed Dvaita Viveka and Mahavakya Viveka Prakaranas. In the Dvaita Viveka, Sri Vidyaranya analyzes duality, which he classifies as twofold. He analyzes duality as twofold, that is, one is God-made and the other is man-made. The God-made duality is harmless, but the man-made duality is responsible for all afflictions and hence should be got rid of. After explaining the God-made duality, which are Maya and Moha Shakti, deluding power, the man-made duality is explained relying on the Upanishadic passage Saptanna Brahmana in Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. Saptanna Brahmane Dvaitam Jivasrishtam Prapanchitam. If the duality is eradicated, the highest limit of Jivan Mukti can be easily obtained. That will be the Jivan Mukti. So it's not getting that, it itself is a Jivan Mukti. Jivan Muktehe Parakashta Jivadvaita Vivarjanad Labhyate Asau Ataha Atredam Ishat Dvaitat Viveshanam. The last chapter in the first section again is the Mahavakya Viveka. This seems to be a smallest one with 8 verses only. The 4 Mahavakyas, starting from the sequence of the Rig Veda, starting from the Prajnanam Brahma down to the Ayamatma Brahma. So the 4 Mahavakyas are discussed and explained in just 8 verses with 2 verses for each Mahavakya. And in the second section, which contains the Deepa Panchaka, it's an interesting one with more than 100 verses in each chapter except the Nataka Deepa Prakarana with very few verses, that is 26 or something like that. Sri Vidyaranya, as already said, explains the concepts in lucid style with the illustrations or examples which can be understood even by a layman. In Chitradeepa, the concepts of Brahman, Ishvara and Jiva are explained. Brahman is the unconditioned one, like the ether at large. In the opening of the chapter itself, through beautiful illustration, the nature of Brahman and the inner ruler, or the indwelling spirit, that is Antaryamin, are all beautifully described. We still remember Professor Krishnamurti Shastrigal was explaining that Panchadashi with a beautiful description of that painting, that stream falling from the mountain and people are bathing there, and with the beautiful dress, colors and other things, all these are painted in the canvas. So there are different pictures, there are different images with different colors, but the base is the canvas cloth. Like that it is going to be explained here. Yatha chitrapate drishtam avasthanam chatushtayam paramatmani vigneyam tata avastha chatushtayam. This is 4 essential factors in such a painting. Similarly, in the 4 aspects in the Brahman case also. Just as the 4 stages observed in the making of a picture, canvas, similarly, the 4 stages must be recognized in the Supreme Self also. In its becoming the universe. The 4 stages are in both the cases. First we will take that canvas picture, etc. And he describes that Yatha dhauto ghattitascha lanchitaha ranjitaha pataha chit antaryami sutratma viradatma tatheryate. Just as the canvas is well washed, made stiff, outlines marked on it, and then colored, so is the self is to be the chit, that is the chit main one, and that is a pure consciousness, and it is also Antaryami, the indwelling ruler, it is Sutratma, the string-like self, and the Virat, the shiner, that is the one which illumines everything. In the case of canvas, it is well washed, it is Dhautav Pataha, so well washed one, and white by itself, doesn't have any color, it's white by itself. Made stiff by using the paste or starch, application of the paste or starch. Outlines marked is in the lines made by ink, colored by painting of colors. And in the case of Brahman again, it is the chit, that is a pure consciousness by itself. Antaryami, however, and here the Maya Sutratma, because of the subtle creation of and Virat, by reason of the gross creation, all living beings from Brahma to the tiniest creatures and even the inanimate things are like the figures on the canvas. They are portrayed on the canvas. The men in the picture are painted wearing different clothes and are variously painted. So each one in the different color. And that they appear as real. They are seen to be real in the appearance, but which is not actually. As the canvas of the picture. Similarly, the consciousness is superimposed on various forms, with various forms. In each of them, there is a reflection. It is the special function of that is a special function of consciousness. They are known as jivas and are subjected to the process of birth and death. And it is, the sloka goes, pratak pratak chitabhasaha chaitanyadhyasta dehinam kalpyante jivanamanaha baudha samsarantyami. Here, slightly touching upon the special aspect of the Panchadashi and the view of Vidyaranya, the Abhasavada is slightly touched upon. According to Abhasavada, the theory of reflection expounded in Panchadashi, there are 4 factors in an act of perception. The intelligence, which has the internal organ as its attribute, together with the reflection of intelligence, is the perceiving agent. 2, the intelligence qualified by the psychosis, together with the reflection of intelligence, is a means of valid knowledge. And the third one is the intelligence defined by part, etc., is the object of object intelligence. And the fourth one is the reflection of intelligence, which is generated by the reflection on the psychosis with part, etc., is the finite intelligence, Palachetana. Here, if a part is to be known, there must be the result in it, the reflection intelligence, which is generated by the relation of the psychosis with the part. And the verse is there, these cites verses also. The intelligence again, which is in the intellect and which has assumed the form of the part, makes known the part. The knownness of the part, however, is caused by the Brahman intelligence. Ghatasya jnatata brahma chaitanyena avabhasate. And this is clearly mentioned here, and the lengthy chapter contains many interesting verses. The Chitradipa section, the Chitradipa chapter contains many interesting verses with suitable illustrations to emphasize the nature of Brahman, Maya, individual soul, etc., with citations from various scriptures. And describing Maya, he describes Maya in various ways. Sometimes he considers Maya as a Kamadhenu, and sometimes he describes Maya as a cloud. So the way how he expresses and brings out the ideas easily understandable by even a common person, that's very interesting. Here he says, Brahman, the lengthy chapter contains many interesting verses and with suitable illustrations to emphasize the nature of Brahman, Maya, individual soul, etc., with citations from various scriptures. And here the Maya is described here as the Kamadhenu. Mayakyayaha Kamadhenoho Vatsau Jiveshwarau. It has got 2 calves, that is Jiva and Ishwara are the 2 calves. Vatsau Jiveshwara Ubhau. Yethecham Pibadam Dvaitam. They can drink milk as to their heart's content. But ultimately, Advaitam Evahi. Tattvam Advaitame. Tattvam tu Advaitam Evahi. There is no difference between the Kutastha. It is explained in the Kutastha here. There are 3 standpoints from which the Maya may be envisaged, says Bharati Tirtha Vidyaranya. The standpoint, the standpoint that is standpoint of revealed experience. He uses the term Shrauta, Yautika, Laukika, Vastavi like that. So the standpoint of revealed experience is Shrauta. That of reasoning is Yukti, through Yukti, that is Yauktika. And that of the ordinary men of the world, that is Laukika. So from the standpoint of ordinary worldly men, Maya is real, Vastavi. They have no reason to doubt its reality. From the standpoint of those who have realized the teaching of scriptures, Maya is unreal, Tuchha. For them, there is no world to be accommodated for, to be accounted for. Maya is that Ya, which is not Ma. So it takes that Ya as Ma then. And for those who seek to understand through reasoning, Maya is indeterminable, Anirvachaniya. He says, Tuchha Anirvachaniya cha Vastavi cha ityasau tridha. Ngeya Maya Tribhir Bodhaihi, Shrauta Yautika Laukikaihi. In another context, Maya is described as a cloud. Maya Meghaha Jaganneeram, Varshatyeva Yathatata, Chidakashasya Nohanihi, Nava Labha iti sthitihi. The rain cloud of Maya pours down the water of universe in any way. There is no loss or gain at all to the Akasha or the consciousness. He describes the characteristics of Maya through various illustrations. In many places, though it seems to be the repetition of the idea, but it is unavoidable. And the characteristics of Maya with various illustrations indicates the universal view that Maya is indeterminable. Na nirupayitum shakya vispattam bhasate chaya sa Maya iti indrajaladau lokaha samprapedire. The birth of a child and the growth of a thing, the growth of a tiny seed into a big tree are the examples given to elucidate the nature of Maya as Indrajala. Here, a beautiful verse is mentioned by our professor previous long back, Chayapati Sharma. And this verse is from PAÑCADAŠީ, and it's a beautiful verse which says, Etasmat kimivendrajalamaparam yat garbhavasa sthitam. Etasmat kimivendrajalamaparam yat garbhavasa sthitam. Retas chetati hastamastaka pada prodbhuta nanankuram. Paryayena shishutva yavvanajara veshai ranekairvritam. Pasyati atti shrunoti jigrati gacchati atha gacchati. This is the Advaita. That is a beautiful Indrajala. Etasmat kimivendrajalamaparam yat garbhavasa sthitam retaha chetati. First chetati. Then hastamastaka pada prodbhuta nanankuram. It develops, the embryo develops. First chetati, then develops, sprouting the limbs. Hastamastaka prodbhuta nanankuram. It undergoes it takes on various dress, various costumes. In sequence, Paryayena Shishutva Yavvana Jara Veshaihi. See how beautifully it is word. Veshaihi Anegaihi Vritam. It sees Pasyati Atti Shrunoti Jigrati Gacchati Atha Gacchati. It goes away as it has come. So it's a beautiful verse which has been mentioned by Chayapati Sharma very often. He used to quote this particular verse every now and then. And this is the Indrajala. This is the Indrajala. And here it is quoted, Etasmad. And in the case of the tree also he says, Dehavat Ghata Dhanado Suvicharya Vilokyatam Kva Dhanaha. In the case of a tiny seed, we don't see the tree there, but it's a small seed. And if it is planted, it grows into a big tree. So the big tree was hidden in that small tiny seed. That is mentioned here. Dehavat Vata Dhanado Suvicharya Vilokyatam Kva Dhanaha Kutrava Vrikshaha Tasmat Mayeti Nishchinu. That is the case of Maya. So the chapter Triptidipa, another lengthy one, and here he takes up the Upanishad statement saying Atmanam Chet Vijaniyat. Here, though we have the introductory portion as the beginning of the Chitradipa, which I had already mentioned, Chikirshitasya Nishpratyuha Paripurnaya Mangalamacharana, etc. The edition brought out by and edited by Jnanananda Bharati, brought out by Vanivilas edition long back. It also shows that this Triptidipa portion authored by Bharati Tirtha and of his colleague and successor in the Sringeri Pitha. And Vidyaranya and Bharati Tirtha are separately mentioned here in this particular edition. See, Vidyaranya, this section has remaining 3 chapters, Kutastha Vidipa, Dhyanadipa, Natakadipa Pragaranas. And all the 3 affirm the spiritual upliftment and the accomplishment to those who contemplate on the contents of those chapters. Each of these chapters contain many verses highlighting the tenets of Advaita philosophy. And in the Triptidipa itself, we have the discussion with regard to the Shravana Manana Nididhyasana also. And explaining the Shravana, he says, Aham Brahmedi Vakyartha Bodhaha Yavatu Dridhi Bhaved. So until that particular statement becomes strong, well rooted in the minds, Aham Brahmedi Vakyartha Bodhaha, the understanding of that meaning of that particular statement, as it gets rooted in the mind, Yavat Dridhi Bhaved. Shamadhi Sahitaha Tavad Abhyaset Shravanadikam. Until then, one should practice this Shravana Manana, in the among the Shravana Manana Nididhyasana. Badam Santi Hyadadyasya Hetavaha Shrutyanegata Asambhavyatvam Arthasya Viparitaja Bhavana Shaka Bhedadu Kamabhedadu Shrutam Karma Anyatha Evam Atrabi Mashanki Iti Ataha Shravana Macharet. So there are different Shrutis which mention different ideas, but stick on to a particular statement and be firm in your resolution, he says. In the commentator says, Yatha shaka bhedat karma bhedaha shruyate yad richaiva kriyate yajusha adbharyavam samna udgitam iti yatha va kama bhedat karirya vrishtikamo yejeta shatakrushnalam ayushkamaha ityadi karma bhedaha shrutaha evam upanishatsvapi pratipadya tattvasya bheda shankayam. In the case of a confusion with regard to the statement mentioned in the Upanishads, bheda shankayam tan nivarana, in order to remove that particular doubt, one should always practice this Shravanam. Shravanam punapunaha kartavyam ityattaha. So in the next verse points out what is to be heard. Vedantanam aseshanam adimadhyavasanataha brahmatmani eva tatparyam iti dhihi Shravanam bhaved. Categorically he defines that Shravana as that one which the understanding of that particular knowledge, that of all the Vedantas, Vedantanam aseshanam, right from the beginning, in the middle as well as in the end, all the Upanishads continuously emphasize the ultimate Brahman, emphasize the nature of Brahman and the realization itself as the idea. So one should fix up that mind on that particular knowledge. Vedantanam aseshanam adimadhyavasanataha brahmatmani eva tatparyam. It is continuous emphasis on the Brahmatman itself. Iti dhihi Shravanam bhaved. So this is the Shravana, this is the nature of Shravana. And in the Kutastha Deepa, in the next chapter, the changeless self is defined. In Nataka Deepa, next one, Vidyaranya explains the changeless nature of Brahman through the example of a lamp. The lamp, just as a lamp which illumines everything but remains quite unaffected. In a drama, in a theater, or in a picture, in an auditorium, the light sheds light on the characters or sheds light on everybody. It doesn't discriminate that the light should be given here, light should be poured here, shed here, like that. So it is common. It doesn't undergo any change. Like that, it remains quite unaffected by any incident that occurs near it. So the lamp is there, the street lamp is there. So below that, the marriage procession goes, and this doesn't become happy. Similarly, if a funeral also passes through that lamp, under that lamp, so it is not affected. So in both the cases, the lamp remains as such, as a Sakshi Chaitanya, as a witness, like that. So Brahman remains, like that, Brahman remains unaffected under any circumstance. In the next chapter, the contemplation of the nature of Brahman, which leads to realization, is described. Finally, in the last section of the 5 chapters, the bliss aspect of Brahman is described under the chapters titled Yogananda, Atmananda, Advaitananda, Vidyananda and Vishayananda. The last verse makes a reference to King Harihara of the Vijayanagara, who was reigning Vijayanagara at that time. Here, the bliss aspect of the nature of self is also explained in great detail in the last 5 chapters. The self is not only the existence and consciousness, it is also bliss, the supreme value. The teaching of Yajnavalkya to Maitreyi in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad constitutes the basis for the understanding the bliss nature of the self. The core of teaching is that the self is the seat of supreme love. Anything becomes dear not for its own sake, but for the sake of the self. Atmanastu kamaya sarvam priyam bhavati, like that. There are, it is true, different notions of selfhood. There are 3 of which may be distinguished. The secondary self, the illusory self, and the principal self. When a parent identifies himself with his son, for instance, the selfhood of the son is in relation to the parent is secondary. The identification of the self with the body, etc., is illusory. The principal self is the unconditioned, non-dual reality. It is this self, in the principal sense, that is the very essence of bliss or love. But even then, even when the self is in the other 2 senses is loved, it is because of the mistaken or wrong identification with the true self. Thus, it is easy to see that the self, whatever be the conception, there is at the center and the seat of love. If there be love for any other object, it is for the sake of self, to which that is subsidiary. It's a reflection of the bliss, that is the self that is experienced as happiness or pleasure in the objects. A right understanding of the happiness that is derived from the contact of the mind with objects may serve as a door to the bliss. That is a Brahman. So all these are discussed in the 5th chapter. Due to the lack of time, let me finish the text. So the bliss that is the self is unexcellable and unconditioned. A calculus. So in Taittiriya Upanishad, Te Shatam Manusha Anandaha, there is a description of the gates of the pleasure there, Anandaha. So given in the Upanishad, starting with the unit measure of human bliss, the higher levels are mentioned there, reached by multiplying each lower level of bliss by 100. One may thus go up to the bliss of the creator of Brahma, but Brahman bliss is beyond all calculation. And the wise one's experience of the plenary bliss admits no degrees. Having achieved all that was to be achieved, and having done all that was to be done, the illumined one rests in perfect content and peace. So the nature of Brahman, that is the self, it is mentioned as Kuttuswami Brahman also. It is the existence, Sat, consciousness, Chit, and that is Sat in the existence, and consciousness, that is a Chit, and finally the bliss, Ananda. Existence, consciousness and bliss are not parts of Brahman or its attributes. They constitute its essential nature, Swarupa itself. In Brahman's essential nature, however, there is no split and no distinction. Brahman is from any of the three kinds of differences, Sajatiya, Vijatiya, and Swagata. So all these are explained by Vidyaranya in a beautiful manner with very common examples which can be seen in everyday life also. Concluding this lecture with the verses composed by Ramurti Shastrigal, when he delivered the lecture here in this campus, in this very hall, on 16/11/1962, so under the Sanskrit Academy. So that was published in the Kamakoti Pradipam also. Fortunately, I was able to get that extract published in the Kamakoti Pradipam, which was published in 3 sections. Ramurti Shastrigal's lecture on Vidyaranya. And there he says, Vidyaranya praising the, Ramurti Shastrigal praising the Vidyaranya, says, Aranye santi simhadyaha tatoranyam bhayankaram Vidyaranyastu vidyabhihi prativadi bhayankaraha Aranye santi cha aushadhyaha tatoranyam hitankaram Vidyaranyaha swa upadeshahi sarvaloka hitankaraha Aranye bahavo vrikshaha vrishtihetuhu ato vanam Vidyaranyaha swa upadeshahi jnana vrishtikaro bhuvi. So he has composed these beautiful verses. There are so many things which are led by me actually. Many interesting verses are there which can be taken, but I could not pinpoint a particular verse. Plenty of verses are still there. If a person goes through the complete text of that, he will enjoy the contents of the Panchadashi and he will appreciate, he can easily understand the tenets also. So that is the beauty of Vidyaranya, who has used very simple, lucid Sanskrit tenses. There is no ambiguity at all. So in the light of commentary, once again, it becomes verily understandable, easily understandable, and one can easily understand the Advaitic tenets described by Vidyaranya. He uses many illustrations. Plenty of illustrations are there. There are repetitions, as I also repeated that idea many times. See, it is only to drive home the idea which is essential for understanding. So I thank the endowment makers, and I thank Professor Srinivasan and Dr. Balasubramanian for the opportunity thrust upon me for the lecture, and I thank them. Thank you very much. Thank you for your patient hearings.
Normally we say it is the pleasant duty of vote of thanks, but should I say so? It is up to you to say. I would like to draw one attention, not of course to Vasudeva's paper. There is Ganga Devi, who is the wife of Kumara Kampana. And Kumara Kampana means Prince Kampana. He was son of Bukka. Bukka was the younger brother of Harihara. And Harihara and Bukka, these two people established Vijayanagara Empire. And she has written Madhura Vijaya, Kumara Kampana's expedition. She has written an account of Kumara Kampana's expedition in about 9 sargas. That work is called Madhura Vijaya. And in the first canto, the background history of how Vijayanagara is established, Ishana Shakti, and all those people who have helped, who are the Rajaguru and all those things. But nowhere Vidyaranya is mentioned in that book. But in the Sringeri Birdavali, we have Vidyaranya Rajadhani. That is, Vidyaranya is referred to as responsible. And of course, the period of Vidyaranya is very late, 1268 to 1272 or something like that. His Aradhana date also may fall Jyeshta Krishna Dashami or something like that. That should be his, that is Tamil Solapana Animasam, somewhere around that period, towards the May end, something like that. So these are some of the situations. That's why we say there are some problems, Bharati Tirtha Vidyaranya, and Professor S.R. Krishnamurti Sastrigal. He has, in Kamakoti Pradipam, lots of information he has collected. How these informations are contradictory or how these informations go together, all those informations he has collected, and those informations have been stated. Say Polagam Rama Sastrigal, S.R. Krishnamurti Sastrigal, these people have worked very much. And Professor T.M.P. Mahadevan's thesis also was around Bharati Tirtha Vidyaranya, as they say. And the Panchadasi starts with Namasri Shankarananda Gurupadam Bhujanmane Savilasa Mahamoha Graha Grasaika Karmane. That is the Mangala Sloka. Shankarananda is being saluted there in what is called in Panchadasi. Traditionally, Panchadasi is a nickname. Traditionally, that work is called Panchadasha Prakarana. It is a collection of 15 works. That's why in each and every work, that is, he has referred to Tattva Viveka Prakarana, Mahabhuta Viveka Prakarana, Mahavakya Prakarana, like that. In all these Prakaranas, there will be Mangala Slokas and Palasrutis and everything. Everything will be there. That's why it is called Panchadasha Prakarana. That is a collection of 15 works. And when quoting elsewhere, people don't say Panchadashyam. Now only in modern thesis we refer to as Panchadashi. But traditionally, when Panchadashi is quoted, they say Uktamcha Chitradipe, Uktamcha Natakadipe, Uktamcha Tattva Viveke. Like that, the individual works are being referred to as if it is a different work. These are some of the general information connected with this work. I'm not going in detail because he has collected, he said, I'm going to give general information, not going into detail, but he has collected lots of points about Advaita Vedanta and presented them together. I don't want to repeat all those things. And I want to refer to one important point. In the late 19th century and early 20th century, there were two great Advaitins. One was Nischaladasa and another one was Bellangonda Ramaraya Kavi. These two people, they have what is called done lots of upanyasas, works, written works, etc. And there were very many influence. Their influence was extremely more. In fact, Nischaladasa wrote 3 works: Vritti Prabhakara, Vichara Sagara, and Vichara Chandrodaya. And Bellangonda Ramaraya also, he is a great grammarian. And he has threadbare criticized Visishtadvaita, that is Ramanuja's and Vedanta Desika's Gita Bhashya and Jignasa Adhikarana, Sri Bhashya and Sruta Prakasika. These two he has criticized. The Jignasa Adhikarana criticism is available in Sankara Bhashya, and of course Gita Bhashya criticism in Bhashyarka Prakasika. That's a commentary on Shankara's Bhashya and Gita. But these two people, Bellangonda Ramaraya was originally a Vaishnavite, but he had doubt, he had some problems. He could not get himself convinced of it. But when he was exposed to Vidyaranya's Panchadasi, then he became what is called, it is moksha as if it were. Then they became very thorough and convinced Advaitin, and they became what is called, started writing lots of works. So, convincing people, bringing them round and taking them into their fold, that was the great role played by Vidyaranya. So, post-Vidyaranya period, the influence was by Vidyaranya. And Vritti Prabhakara, though not directly a commentary on Panchadasi, yet it is extensively influenced by and quoted Panchadasi. So that's an important work in this way. I want to just say about the influence of Vidyaranya, because benchmark, as we say, post-influence, in that particular aspect, Vidyaranya's work is very important. And as they say, people have asked Vivekananda, what do you think is the contribution of what is called Shankara? Then he is supposed to have said, it is an apocrypha. I mean, I have not gone through the original work, that's why I say it is apocrypha, it is there. The point is, nobody can neglect Shankara. Either he is what is called positively you have to react, or negatively you have to react. You cannot what is called neglect Shankara. You cannot leave him out. So, like that, Vidyaranya also was to be taken into account. No philosopher can neglect Vidyaranya. Either they have to be the followers or they have to be the opponents of Vidyaranya. But leaving out Vidyaranya, there cannot be any post-Vidyaranya philosopher. That was the greatness of Vidyaranya. And that sort of Vidyaranya we could have. P.V. Sivaram Dikshitar, who was the former principal here, he has created an endowment in the name of his father, Venkatesa Dikshitar, Vidyaranya, on Vidyaranya, to bring out the knowledge of Vidyaranya to you, to all the people here. And our Mr. Venkatraman is here, other people who are all connected with the Sri R. Narasimhachari, a great doyen among the lawyers, and in the name of their senior, they have created an endowment to bring about, say, Vedanta is not simply an ordinary subject. Those who study Vedanta, especially Vedantic subjects, their knowledge also becomes very sharp, their arguments also becomes very sharp, their thinking also becomes very sharp. In that way, in order to what is called befitting their seniors, the legal acumen, Vedantic lectures have been arranged, and we have arranged it this year on Vidyaranya. And we thank the endowment makers, both from Sanskrit Academy as well as from Kuppuswami Research Institute, for making it possible to arrange the Vidyaranya Day lecture, and Professor Vasudeva to prepare on Vidyaranya and bring out such beautiful, say for example, that 5 characteristics, Akase Shabda Gunaha, Vayo Bisiti Sabdaha, Vannau Bugu Dvanihi, and Gulu Dvanihi. These are all, when Panchikarana is there, how can Shabda be there in Prithvi, Up, Tejas, etc.? So Shabda is found in all the 5 elements. That is being given by Vidyaranya, and that he has presented. That's exactly opposed to Sankhya philosophy also. So he has nicely presented all these things. He has collected those points, but maybe because the essential points, positive points alone to be presented, he has presented those points. As he said, I am not going detail into arguments. So thank you, Professor Vasudeva, and I thank all the people for you to be present here. I thank one and all.